Welcome to Becoming Your Own Best Boss. My name's Dante St. James. We're going to go through it looking at some of the core things that will help you to become a better boss for yourself and perhaps even a better boss for other people as well. It's a very different world being an employee to being a boss of your own business. And we're going to look at some of those changes and how a little bit of personal development and personal responsibility can really lift that up for you. First of all, though, I'm going to share my screen so you'll be able to see what we're going through. Know that the chat window is open, as is the Q&A. So if you've got questions along the way, there's a few of you on this webinar right now live. Please do jump in and ask those questions. If you're watching on YouTube, though, please do pop those questions down in the comments, and we'll come back to those a little bit later on once we've had a chance to get back to this particular channel as well. So let's share that screen and get underway. A quote here from Lily Singh, who's a Canadian-Indian comedian and actress. She says, "I'm my own boss, my own editor, my own shooter, my own writer, my own everything. This is all stuff I learned through trial and error. Failing at a lot of things has taught me how to succeed at them eventually." So Lily takes a lot of control of that. And that's a theme you're going to see coming through here a lot, is that whole theme of taking control of your situation, taking control of your business. And a lot of it starts with taking control of your attitudes. What we're going to look at today is listening to your self-talk, learning to coach yourself, a process we call owning the job. I think that's a really good way of putting it, actually. Owning the job, learning to be an initiator, looking at self-empowerment, looking at your strengths and weaknesses, and finally, taking control of your own professional development. It's a very different place to waiting for someone to do that professional development for you. This is part of Business Station and the Australian Small Business Advisory Digital Solutions Program, sponsored by the Australian Government and presented in Western Australia by Business Station, in Queensland by Regional Development Australia Brisbane, and by Treaty Business Consulting in the Northern Territory. I'll just go back there. I just went a little bit ahead. If you want to follow this on YouTube a little bit later on, it will be posted there in about 2 hours' time. Just look for Business Station or look for my name, Dante St. James. And while we're on me, a little bit more about me. I work with my own business called Clickstarter, a regional Australian digital marketing channel. I've got a training business, funnily enough, a coffee supply company. That's a whole different story, that I don't present coffee itself, but I supply a couple of widgets that go out to a few local places here. So it's got nothing to do with coffee itself. It's something that sits on the side of coffee. I've also got an e-commerce brand and my own training company called Dante St. James, which is, funnily enough, my name. I work with the New Business Assistance with NICE program, Google's Digital Springboard program, Treaty Business Consulting in the NT as a digital advisor, and with Facebook as one of their lead trainers across Australia and New Zealand. Well, the dream of owning your own business. We all know it. We got into it to do these things. We got into it with these ideas in mind of what we would achieve. And sometimes it becomes very, very different to what we thought it was going to be. It's not quite the dream that we expected. That said, 60% of businesses that we start every year are aged between 40 and 60 years old. So it's not like we're starting these things when we're young. It's like we're doing a whole lot of stuff before we get to the point of starting a business, and understanding that we come with a whole lot of experiences and a whole lot of life's journey before we go and start a business. Between 40 and 60 years old, 60% of those businesses are started by that group. I'm in that group. You might be in that group as well. And the beauty of that, in that group of 40 to 60-year-olds who are starting those new businesses, only 22% of them fail in year one. We often hear these horrible, horrible things about all these businesses failing. What's changed, though, is when there's so much of online availability and the startup costs are so much lower than what they used to be if you're doing something virtual or a consultation job or something in the world of sole trading that's not necessarily in a shop front or in an office building, then the chances of failing are that much less, because you're running it either from home, you're doing it as a side gig, you might be running it from the garage or running it from a very cheap way of doing it, rather than having to spend tens of thousands of dollars just on those initial setup costs. One funny well, a couple of really funny ones. 26% of new businesses are started because we want to be our own boss. I don't know about you, but I hated being an employee. I was a very good employee. I was a very diligent employee. Most of the time, I was very, very locked into the job of what I was doing and very much a part of the team. But there was some times when I tell you, I really did not like being an employee, mostly because I don't like being told when I take time off. I don't like being told that I need to be in at this time and leave at this time. I don't like being told that I can only have 4 weeks of annual leave every year. I want more than that, even though I don't really tend to do that as part of my job. But I wanted to be the one who defined those things. I didn't want some nebulous person in my life telling me that I could take time off like this or I would only do this thing. I wanted to be in control of my own job and essentially my own destiny. 23% of us, though, got into a new business because we wanted to pursue a passion. And a lot of these are very closely related. If you took on a new job to become a boss because you really wanted to be a boss, then you're probably the sort of person who then went out after that and went, I want to be the boss. Well, then if I'm going to be the boss, I'm going to pick the kind of business that I want to do because I'm passionate about this particular thing. Whatever that thing might happen to be, you're really passionate enough about it to take time out of your life and take something which you love and turn it into something that's going to make you some money. The problem is, so few of us are prepared to be bosses. In many cases, many of us weren't even bosses in the first place. I was a terrible boss. I have to admit, I was an absolutely atrocious boss. And my problem with being a boss was I was a little bit too soft. I liked people liking me. I didn't want to necessarily let people know that my weakness was that I wanted to be liked. I didn't want to be controlling people. In fact, I didn't want to be like the bosses I'd had who were just so hard and so harsh and so removed from the reality of my life that I didn't want to be that. So I became a little bit too soft. The problem was, though, employees would run all over me, things would go all wrong. And at that stage in my life and my career, I wasn't ready to take a lot of personal responsibility for that. I was just liking to blame everything else around me rather than the things that I did that actually helped cause those problems as well. So few of us are prepared to be leaders or managers. We just kind of land in positions. In most cases, that's the case. Say what you like about teams like McDonald's or other businesses that have lots of employees and training programs, and love them or hate them, but when they've got solid leadership and management programs, it's not like anybody is ever put in a position they're not ready for, and if they are, they're pulled back and trained and nurtured more to be able to do that. When it's your own business, though, nobody's going to do that preparation for you. You have to do that all for yourself, and we'll cover off some of that personal development kind of stuff really shortly. First of all, though, we need to acknowledge that there's a little voice inside your head that tells you a lot of things that aren't necessarily true. It will say things like, you can do it. But then in the same breath, it'll say, who the hell do you think you are? In one breath, it'll say, you're the best. But in the next, it's going to say, you can't do this. The same voice that says, let's go, says, oh, I don't think I can. That little voice inside your head often lies to you. But it's only lie. It's not like it's a nasty voice. It's not like an evil voice. It's not like a voice that's out to destroy you. It's a voice that's actually out to protect you. It's an evolutionary tactic that's come into our brains that says, look, before you jump, make sure you know you really want to jump because things could happen. The problem is, though, once we live in quite fairly safe, cobbled lifestyles like we do in the Western world, where things are a lot more predictable, we don't have rockets going overhead trying to bomb our apartment blocks. We don't have a lot of war or conflict going on in our lives apart from very low level stuff. We tend to think, well, the worst things that could happen to me are probably absolutely awful because let's face it, in most of the time in our lives, the worst things that happen to us are very personal things. They're not really existential problems out there that are actually that they're looking to kill us. That may be the case in some people's lives. In most of our lives, there's not somebody who I have to look around in this apartment all the time who I fear that's going to kill me. So that little voice sometimes lies, but often that little voice is trying to protect you. So there's 5 types of what we call negative self-talk. Negative self-talk is what really sort of tells you that you can and can't do things. Well, mostly can't do things. It's that one that says, who the hell do you think you are? It's the basis of all that. Imposter syndrome. So there's 5 different types of negative talk. They come in the form of what we call emotional reasoning. or perfectionism, or personalization. Another one is mind reading. And then there's catastrophizing. Say that 5 times in a row. You're going to get stuck on that word, catastrophizing. We'll explain what all these are. Let's dig down a little bit deeper into what those net sales talks are. I'm just going to turn off my video for a second because I don't really think we need to have it on there. And it's sort of standing in the way of something else on my screen. Now, emotional reasoning is negative self-talk that says that your negative feelings are an actual representation of reality. It's saying that I feel bad today, so today must be a bad day. It's the kind of reasoning that says, I feel fat, so therefore I am fat. I am incompetent, so therefore I must be incompetent. I am tired today, so therefore I'm going to fail at everything I do today. It's taking an emotional state that you're in and then converting that into a reality that you created around you. So a lot of people who are those your thoughts create your reality type of people would come back and say then, well, this is actually true. Your emotional state, the state that you go into any situation, is going to have a massive impact, if not the majority of impact, on the reality that you then project in the world. So if you feel bad today, you can tend to have this emotional reasoning that says today is going to be a bad day, whether or not that's actually going to be true, because you cannot necessarily predict everything that will happen in that day, but you're projecting out that there's going to be a bad day. Chances are it's probably going to be a bad day. Perfectionism, that one doesn't really need a lot of explanation because it's just those people who can never see the success in anything they've done because it was never done quite perfect. If it doesn't go perfectly, then it is therefore a complete failure. In a test, if they get 99 out of 100, they'll say, I've completely and utterly failed because I didn't get 100%. This is quite a cancer on organizations and a real cancer on businesses. We're often saying that perfectionism is perfect is the enemy of done. And the problem is that businesses have to get work done. Now, depending on what you're working, if you're working on aircraft mechanics, then everything, yes, does have to be absolutely perfect. Otherwise, people die. But if you're working on a website, if things aren't completely and utterly perfect, it doesn't mean that that website is not going to be effective or sold. It doesn't mean that you are a complete and utter failure and you should be fired from your job or should just give up on your business altogether. Perfectionism is negative self-talk at its very, very core. Another form of negative self-talk is what we call personalization. When you see yourself as the cause of something going wrong, when in fact you weren't the cause at all. And this could be something like the team would have won if it wasn't for me being such an idiot. So you could be playing touch football and you fell over and the team lost, and you think that the team lost because you fell over, but the reality is the team lost because the other team was simply better. You falling over wasn't the cause of the loss. It may have been, the reason why someone didn't score a try. It may be a reason why someone didn't get across the goal at the end of the field. That doesn't mean that you lost that game. It wasn't you that lost the game. It was just a whole set of circumstances of which you were part of that as well, but you were not the complete and utter reason for that failure of losing. It's just a very narcissistic thing. And that's what you got to understand. It's very, very selfish, self-absorbed, and narcissistic to assume that everything goes wrong because of your actions or inactions. That's kind of like a mental illness that needs to be looked at in its most extreme states. Another one's mind reading, is where we jump to a conclusion without evidence that the outcome of something will be negative. I know we are going to fail. I can feel it in my waters. That kind of thing. It's trying to be a psychic, or trying to be someone who can read palms or read the future or look into a crystal ball. It's this kind of person who just looks at what their mental state is going into a situation and just says, this is going to fail. And I just know it's going to fail. It's the person who assumes the conclusion, but they don't have the evidence to actually support that. They can walk into a room and say, they're going to hate me the people in this room are going to hate me when I come up to speak because, I can feel it. I can just feel the room. It's a negative room and they're going to hate me. You don't have any evidence of that. An idea of a negative room is something you've made up in your head. And you're essentially, again, it's very, very close to personalizing. It's actually saying that, everything will fail because you will fail, and you will fail, but you don't have a reason for that failing. You're just simply saying that I'll fail because I'll fail because I'll fail. You're saying that it's destined to be that way. And that's a lot of people who like to what they call go with the flow when it comes to business. They never really get over this. They always have to absolve themselves of responsibility because that was the flow and they were out of the flow, and the flow went another way. The wind changed direction. COVID happened. Name your excuse here. It's COVID's there, so therefore our economy is going to collapse. COVID came, our economy hasn't collapsed. So a lot of the doomsayers at the beginning of the pandemic in Australia particularly seemed to think that everything was going to crash down around us. Now, some people lost jobs, some people lost their lives. The economy didn't collapse, and we're doing okay. We are doing okay, even though things such as like the China trade war is saying that this China trade war is going to cause us all manner of problems and our economy will collapse. Our economy hasn't collapsed yet. If they stop buying our iron ore, our economy won't necessarily collapse. It will affect it, but it won't collapse. Mind reading is saying that you know the outcome of something before it's going to happen because you have some sort of special ability to be able to read the future. Catastrophizing is quite dramatic. It's basically looking for the catastrophe in every possible scenario, assuming that the worst possible thing could happen in any single situation. So it's saying that if you don't, if this particular thing you're working on doesn't work, you'll end up living on the streets. It's taking everything to what we call the nth degree, the absolute extreme of where it could go. It's saying, for instance, if I lose this one contract, then my entire family will be on the streets and will never ever be able to recover from this. This is just like going to the extremes of what you think that whole crystal balling thing is. It's like you're looking into the future yourself. And so it's a little bit related to the idea of mind reading. You're trying to predict the future based upon your influence on some kind of massive world scale if you do this thing or don't do this one thing. It's saying that it's like the butterfly effect. They're saying if the butterfly flaps its wings in Peru, it's going to cause a tsunami in Japan. We know that that is actually not true. We've never been able to prove it, and there's no evidence to support it. So therefore, we're just catastrophizing. We're saying that this little small thing is going to cause massive actions down the track, and it's just not necessarily true. So, what can you do about all that negative self-talk that's going on in your life that helps you to be your own best boss? Well, one thing you can do is learn to coach yourself. This is where you are taking control of everything to do with yourself and your business and the development of yourself and that business. We take control of this by removing negative self-talk that you dramatically improve your performance by removing. So if you remove that self-talk, things will naturally improve. That's not, trying to be very crystal ballish or cloudish. It's just simply that when you stop creating bad situations because you're coming into a situation with a bad state of mind, then you will improve. If you stop catastrophizing and assuming that this one mistake is going to cause drastic repercussions for the entire planet, then you naturally start improving because you are not self-sabotaging yourself along the way. A good boss of their own business coaches themselves and negatively and actively removes negative self-talk because they understand that they need to be in a great place in order to do great things. So you overcome negative self-talk by three things. You recognize that that self-talk is negative. Then you label that self-talk. Finally, you then go to replace that self-talk. You're going to go beyond the letting it happen and just going with the flow. Going with the flow is the enemy of business. You don't go with the flow in business. There's no such thing. It doesn't matter whether you're working in energy healing or whether you're working in investment banking in your business. You take control of things. You have control of that destiny. So recognizing that negative self-talk is there, labeling it and calling it out and saying that it's negative self-talk and actually making sure that it's known to you that it is, and then actively going and replacing it is how you do it. So let's break that down a bit. First of all, when you recognize negative self-talk, it takes all the power away from it. When you're not aware of negative self-talk, it just goes on and on and on, and it's a reinforcing behavior that keeps affecting your life, keeps affecting your business, and keeps affecting your ability to be a boss of your own life and your own business. When you're not aware of negative self-talk, it just runs rampant over your life, over your business, over your family, over everything in your life. Things seem to actually match your negative thoughts. So things, you recognize that when you have those negative thoughts, they seem to predict a behavior or an outcome, then you know that these negative thoughts are going down a path that's really destructive for you. So recognizing it takes the power away from it. Recognizing it, recognize that things actually do seem to match your negative thoughts, that when you have the negative thoughts, that things tend to go negatively. Then you also recognize that when you pay attention to it, you'll notice when it starts. This is like an interrupt cycle. If there's something which is going around and around and around, let's just say a bicycle wheel, suddenly you stick a stick in it, it stops it dead. It stops it from being able to go forward anymore. Now, you may fall off and crash and bung up your knee, but at the same time, it stops that thing going forward. So when you recognize something, it's like it stops you dead in your tracks. When you recognize a friend in the street, it stops you in your tracks, and then you make a decision about what you want to do next. If you recognize a painting on a picture and you go, I know what that is, it makes you stop and take notice. And when you stop and take notice, that going with the flow that you're doing stops. That creation of a negative pattern of behavior because you're having negative thoughts stops. And when you've noticed when it starts, you have the opportunity to now do something with it. So it's not just a matter of just recognizing it and stopping. Now we need to move on to the next step, which is where you label that. Now, giving something a name gives it attributes. When you look at that self-thinking that you're going on, that self-talk that's going on in your head, and that thing that's telling you that you can't do it, you need to label that. And the reason why we label it and give it a name is that it loses all its power. It's not just this mysterious, magical thing that's going around and changing us and affecting our lives. It's now something that we have some control over. So we can recognize that negative self-talk's happening, but then we need to label it into something such as the ones we're looking at: emotional reasoning. Is it perfectionism? Is it personalization? Is it mind reading? Are we catastrophizing? Hopefully I just spelled that right in there. Yeah, I did. Yep, I seem to get it right. It's just a word that just doesn't seem right, doesn't it? So which kind of negative self-talk are you going in? If you're going down the path and you're saying, I can't do this, it's all going to fail, are you looking at mind reading? You're assuming that things are going to fail because you don't feel good about yourself. If you're going down the path of, I need to get this absolutely perfect because if I don't, everything's going to fail, then you're into perfectionism. You can label that as it's happening and say, you know what? I'm mind reading again. Why am I trying to predict the future? I'm being a crystal ball gazer. I'm being a clairvoyant. That's not my job right now. So when you label it, you're able to go, not only have I stopped it by recognizing it, I give it a name. Once I give it a name, I know that I need to do something about this. I either accept it and continue down that path, or like most people do when they self-coach themselves, is that they go in a new direction. And this is what we now do. Once we've labeled it, we then start the process of replacing that negative self-talk with something new. Once you recognize it, once you've stopped that spiral down, you can turn it around into something else. The negative thought comes in, you recognize it, you call it out, and you say, yeah, I know what you are. You're that crystal ball mind reading thing that I was doing. I need to change the way I'm looking. Then you replace it. And how do you replace it? How do you actually action that in your life? How do you move on to the next thing? Well, you do that in the different kinds of negative self-talk through specific actions. So let's just say you're doing some emotional reasoning. The example here is that I feel incompetent, which must mean that I am incompetent. So because you feel a certain way, it must mean that exists. If I feel like I'm not able to do this, then I clearly am not able to do this. This emotional reasoning can then be turned around by saying, look, yes, I feel incompetent right now. I accept that. But I also know that my feelings are not an accurate reflection of reality. I'll develop my skills to feel more competent in the future. So it's not just denying anything. It's not just trying to ignore anything. What it's actually trying to do is tell you that, yeah, okay, I feel incompetent. I accept that I feel that way. But my feelings aren't my reality. Just because I feel that incompetent doesn't mean that someone else sees me as incompetent. When I go through this, when I think that I'm just not able to deliver something, then I go to the client that I'm talking to and they say, I've got full confidence in you. You do amazing work. You've been so good to us so far. Then I realized that the self-talk I gave myself about being not good enough or incompetent actually wasn't real. It was just something that I had in my mind, that I convinced myself that I must be bad at my job, I must be incompetent, and therefore that's the reality and I can't do anything about it. The truth was, I was actually very good at what I did, and the client loved that work. Next, we look at perfectionism, and this is where I get stuck in these presentations of trying to make them absolutely perfect. The problem with perfectionism is that you'll never actually reach perfect. There's no such thing as perfect when it comes to business or anything in it. Even if someone returns to you and says, oh, it's not quite perfect, or if they even say, oh my God, that's absolutely perfect, there's no such thing. So perfectionism is buying into a lie. So this example could be that you've put out a piece of work and the client has come back to you with one change, and you've said, well, the client had one change they wanted. I've completely failed. That seems really extreme, but this is the way that some people think, particularly people in creative fields, from artists to graphic designers, right through to website designers. When you're producing something that comes from your talent and your abilities, and someone has some feedback of even one thing, that's when you can feel like you have utterly failed. Now, I still struggle with this one myself to this day. When I'm producing a website and someone comes back and they need some changes, then I've got a problem, because in my head, I feel like I've failed and I'm not good enough, and they think that they know better than I do. And I go on this whole rant down my mind. Now, the only way I can turn that around is that I have to accept that the client only had one change they needed to make. They could have changed 50 things, but they had one thing or two things or three things out of 100. That's a great outcome. That's so good. That means that the work I need to do to correct those things or make those changes is not much. It could have been a whole lot worse, but it wasn't. The client only wanted the one change. Therefore, I have had a pretty great crack at that and done very well. Personalization, if you say that this is where you take the blame on yourself for something that isn't necessarily yours to take the blame on. So it says that if I'd worked harder, we would have won that contract. But the reality is that you need to turn that around, because it's not necessarily true. We don't know that if you had worked harder, that you would have won that contract. You don't know what the result was of the other people who did win the contract. Was it because they worked harder, or was it because they have a different product stream, or they have a different way of costing things? So if you worked hard, that's fine, except that you worked hard. We all did. We didn't win the contract, but that wasn't from our lack of hard work, because we actually did work hard. I worked hard. They worked hard. We didn't win the contract. That is what it is. And it definitely wasn't due to a lack of work. Removing that personalization, actually understanding that you didn't win the contract and that wasn't based upon necessarily a lack of work, is freeing. It's liberating. It doesn't actually remove responsibility. It doesn't remove the effects of not winning that contract. There's still things that will happen. If you did win that contract, you would have had a certain path through your next 2, 3, 5, 12, 18 months. But you didn't win that contract, so the world hasn't collapsed. You haven't died. So there's some repercussions of that, and there's also some responsibility for that. And we'll look at that really shortly, because personalization can be a very healthy thing where you actually attach some responsibility to yourself for the outcome. But what this does is prevents you from moving forward, because you're preemptively assigning responsibility or blame for something on yourself and what you did or didn't do. That's very different from taking responsibility. Next, we'll get mind reading, probably my favorite one, because there's so many people who act in this way. Oh no, they didn't go, they didn't get back to me. It's because they're a Gemini. Oh yes, well, they're a little bit floaty and airy fairy and really hard to commit. It must be because they're an Aquarius. Yeah, so often it's just that they're airy fairy and floaty. It's not that they're an Aquarius. There could be something that says they don't let me present to the clients in these meetings. They think I'm bad at presenting. So you're actually making a very, very broad assumption here. You're not just saying that they don't let me meet with the clients. You're then saying at the same time that not only do they not let me meet with the clients, but they also think I'm bad at presenting. Now, no one's told you you're bad at presenting. No one's actually even indicated that. So the turning around of that negative self-talk is saying, rather than assuming that they think I'm bad at presenting, we turn that around to they don't let me present to the clients. Maybe they actually like presenting to the clients themselves, or maybe there's a whole other reason that I'm not aware of. So instead of making the assumption that it's because of you, it you just take that assumption away and say there could be a myriad of reasons why they don't let me do the presenting. It may even be because I've never actually asked. Consider that. You can always ask about it. So that's not trying to take that prediction of the future and actually making assumptions and reading into people's motivations when those things are not necessarily true. If you want to turn around catastrophizing, that's when you go from, if I don't meet this deadline, I'll never be taken seriously again. It's again making very broad assumptions and all sorts of predictions about what the reasons are or the cosmic significance of a particular thing going right or wrong. If I don't meet this deadline, I'll never be taken seriously again. It's so dramatic, isn't it? The reality is if I miss this deadline, I will disappoint some people. I'll need to work smarter to avoid that happening again. It's looking at something very reasonably. It's not looking at it as a giant drama. If I don't get this right, everything will fail. My plans will be dashed. I'll be failure in business. People will laugh at me. I'll be essentially laughed out of town. Be less dramatic about that and understand that if you miss the deadline, yes, you may disappoint a few people here and there. And yes, you probably need to work a little smarter next time to avoid this from happening all over again. The giant catastrophe is not going to happen because you got something in late. Another extra thing I'll add in here is often we have a need for validation. And this is something I've battled with all of my life, that I don't feel like I'm doing something well unless somebody is necessarily telling me that I'm doing that thing well. But validation or self-validation it's a skill that you will develop right across your life. And it's a sign of a mature adult and also the sign of a mature business owner where they don't seek outside validation to feel great about what they do. We see a lot of people who are awards chasers. I know a couple of people who I work with who are always chasing awards because they think that those awards validate their work. They also think that that's what's going to set them apart, that someone's going to choose them because of those awards. But I can tell you now that I don't recall anybody in my life ever choosing someone over me because they won a Telstra Business Award. In fact, I know quite a lot of Telstra Business Award winners who are now out of business. So it's not really that you're looking for that validation to get new clients. It's often getting that validation because you need the applause. That Lady Gaga song of applause, where I live for the applause, is the big theme in that song. That's very similar to a path that I've gone through. And it may be a path that you're going through too. It says that no one's praising me, so I must be really bad at what I do. Or I'm not having any impact because nobody's giving me comments, the Instagram effect. Instead of that, the emotionally mature business owner and the emotionally mature person recognizes that I work hard, I'm smart, I'm good at what I do. Look at this. I've got all this show for it. I don't need others to validate me on any of that. I don't need a Telstra Business Award. I don't need the Digital Professional of the Year award. When you go chasing those things and you don't win them, it can be very, very, very harsh on you. Awards for business owners are just something you can make up. You can literally set up your own awards and hand them out to people and even hand one out to yourself. You can literally invent awards. In fact, so many people do. The internet is full of fake awards. All they do is use them to get people in their sales funnel. So you often hear, oh, like this person is the top LinkedIn professional who won the award for the top LinkedIn professional in the Asia Pacific region. And then they go and look into that award, and it's just some award that someone's made up. It's not like it's come from some industry body. It's come from an influencer who's decided to set up their own awards, to set up their own party. And you see it with, small business champion awards. They're all made up. They're all usually a company or a business in themselves, and they've made a business out of creating awards and awards ceremonies. They make money from those big dinners and those formal occasions, and you walk away. It often costs you a lot of money to enter these things too, or to be connected with that particular influencer or that particular coach or guru who's running those. You don't need outside awards to validate you. I need to tell myself as well, stop studying and getting certificates just to validate that you know what you're doing. You clearly know what you're doing. You work for freaking Facebook, you know what you're doing. The next step in being an emotionally mature business and being the best possible boss to yourself and to your business that you can be is the art of taking ownership. This is one of those things that I think our grandparents and even our parents quite often say that generation X, Y, Z, generation millennial, generate whatever the generations are all supposed to be, that we just don't take responsibility for our actions. We don't have a level of ownership over our own lives. We like to blame everyone else. I'm offended because of this. I have failed because it's someone else's fault. Taking ownership is more than just assigning blame or taking the blame for yourself. It's actually a very strong strategic instinct you have to develop over time as a business owner. Those who lack ownership over their lives or over their businesses or over their work, they like to have an idea and then expect others to take it over from there. I remember working with a manager of a radio station quite some years ago who blamed me for not carrying out his project. I was not tasked for that project. It was not anything to do with my work that I do, but because nothing happened, he blamed me for nothing happened. I didn't report to him. He was not my boss. He just decided that because he had an idea and put it out there, that I would automatically go and make that happen. He didn't take ownership to make it happen. He didn't follow up. He just left it. It can be something like having a meeting with a client and then leaving it up to them to schedule the follow up. In my case, I'm still trying to follow up from last week's travels around Townsville and Cairns. I haven't got back to all those people with the next steps. So that's something where I've lacked ownership up until today of that, but I've got some time set aside for tonight to actually get that done and get those emails out and invite people to the next step. Lacking ownership also means that you tend to blame a lot of other people and things for things that go wrong. Say, for instance, my business is going bad because COVID. We have to now accept that your business isn't necessarily going bad because COVID isn't really impacting our economy in quite the way that we assumed it would. My business is going bad because the government is corrupt. That's not necessarily going to be the truth either. I don't think we have levels of corruption in this country that affect one small business over every other one. Or blaming other people, that lacking of ownership is saying that, oh, I don't know if I'm going to be able to make payroll this week, because times are tough. That because times are tough is just a big excuse that's being used. I don't know how many times I keep hearing that times are tough, or because the state of the economy. Our economy is actually pretty strong, in case you're not noticed. In fact, over the last 35 years, the economy has been remarkably strong. We keep talking about, oh yeah, tough times, tough times. Who is it actually tough times for? It just seems that there's a lot of businesses that don't take ownership over their good financial management. So there are definitely outside influences that make life hard. But when you take ownership for these things spin around. The person who takes ownership raises an idea and makes it their own project to check up on. They raise the idea, they get people on board, and they actually just keep getting back there and reminding people about that. They check in on it. Instead of leaving it for 6 months to stew and then complain that nothing got done, they'd actually go, okay, so I've got this idea. What do we do next? And you say, okay, let's have a meeting. Great, let's have a meeting. Let's do it now. And then they do that meeting, and then there's tasks and action plans to go forward with. Having an idea and just like letting it float out there for someone is not taking ownership. Taking ownership is also immediately following up on things like meetings with the next steps and getting committed to those next steps. So for instance, I said I would take ownership over contacting the people that I was in a workshop with last week in Queensland. Haven't get done it, but I'm doing it tonight. I've accepted that maybe I've left this a little bit long. It's been a week since I actually said I would. So now I need to actually take that forward. My inbox is absolutely chock-a-block full of people I haven't got back to yet, but it's not their fault that I haven't responded. It's not the fault of COVID or the economy or the fact that, I just seem to be in quite high demand for what I do right now. It's my fault for not taking ownership. I can always respond to those people and say, look, I can't respond fully right now. Please give me a couple more days and I'll come back to you with a more thorough response. That is taking ownership. Taking ownership is also understanding the buck stops with you, and for everything in your business, you are ultimately responsible. You are your own best boss when you take ultimate responsibility for all the things that happen in your business. This is really easy to do when you're not in a business that you own. If you've been working like most people do in a job for all their lives and things go wrong, it feels really easy to sort of blame the team, blame the boss, blame the company, blame the CEO, blame the economic conditions, blame that mistake they made with that investment that didn't pay off. What you do as a small business owner is that you don't get to blame other people. You are the owner. You are the driver. You are the person who's going forward from here. You then are the buck. It stops with you. The core of taking ownership is accepting that both the blame for the things going wrong and the praise for the things going right are yours. And this is an important distinction. We're not just talking about you taking the blame for things going wrong. You also need to take some credit for things going right. For instance, if we failed, I accepted that I played a part in this failure. But if we succeed, I accept that I played a part in the success. If we lost a client, this is ultimately my responsibility. But if we gained a new client, just the same, I can take credit for that win. If my business is running at a loss, I can't blame anyone else, as this is my business and I'm responsible for that. But if my business is profitable, take the praise from yourself that you've done the right things to ensure that your business is thriving. You take responsibility for the failures, but you also take some credit for the wins as well. And we often don't do that. Once we accept personal responsibility, we think that personal responsibility is 100% about taking the blame for things, being responsible for the bad stuff that happens. But taking responsibility, taking ownership, being your own best boss also means you celebrate the wins. You accept that you played a part in it. You accept that it's because of your management that you gain new clients, or you've got a new business line of business, or that you're working with the bookkeeper and the accountant meant that you're able to stay ahead and keep your business profitable. It's giving you credit for good work you've done as well. When you take ownership of your business, of your life, of your path forward, people trust you and want to work with you. There's nothing more unattractive than somebody who blames the world for all their things. And I say this now because I used to be this person. I used to say that, oh, it's because they all hate me. There's a conspiracy to remove me. There's a girls' club or a boys' club or an old men's club or an Indian club or a white guys' club, or there's something that's stopping me. I'm hitting that glass ceiling. Oh, that kind of person is just absolutely exhausting to be around. I have a friend who blames everything on his past trauma. He blames everything upon discrimination. But the reality is he gets drunk and does stupid things. And he can't take responsibility for that. And he becomes a very unattractive person. Unattractive people don't attract people to them. If you want people to work with you, take ownership. Take ownership of the wins and the losses. Accept that you are at fault for not winning. Accept that you are the person who helped the win to happen. And then people will come to you. They'll see that confidence. They'll see that it's not that great a risk to come and follow you, because ultimately you take responsibility for the path of your business. And that makes them feel good. That makes them feel safe. People, when they feel safe, will come and follow you to the ends of the earth. Developing initiative is the next thing that makes you your own best boss. In the workplace, working for other people, sometimes that developing of initiative is really hard because we're terrified of a tyrannical boss who's going to cut us down because we did something that we didn't ask about first. But developing initiative is not necessarily about taking massive risks, even though risk taking is one of those things. Initiative is essentially taking action without being told to. It's about stepping out, putting yourself on the line, sometimes taking a risk, yes, but sometimes it's just doing something that's right without being prompted to. You just see that something needs fixing and you fix it. The attributes of someone who has initiative is they go above and beyond the call of duty of their job. So if there's just, here's my job description, I just do that. When I only have to be here until 4:21 in the afternoon because that's all I've been mandated to do as part of my government job, well then, that's all I do. I'm not going above and beyond. People who go above and beyond, they do it because they feel a sense of initiative. They feel a sense of urgency and ownership, and that they need to do this. Business owners who think they're going to get away with waking up at 9 a.m., getting started work at 10:30 a.m. and finishing at 2 are dreaming, especially in that first year or two of getting set up. If that's what you want to do in that first year or two, go and get a job that works part-time. You go above and beyond as a sense of initiative. A good boss of their own life and a good boss of their own business also helps others, so that you'll take initiative and see that someone's struggling and go to them and say, hey, can I show you a different way of doing this? It might actually help out. It's not necessarily going and putting someone down who can't complete a task. It's actually coming back to them and saying, I understand that this is hard. I understand that you're having some struggles with this. So let me show you the way. Showing initiative as a boss is taking risks sometimes. It's saying, I'm going to buy this piece of software that's untested and I'm going to do something with it. I'm going to just take the risk that this may take on a whole different significance in my life. I did that with buying an AI program that allows me to write faster. I did that with getting into Canva very early. I did that with getting onto InVideo to create my videos, or using things like Flixia, which is a way of doing my video work so much more quickly. I had to take a risk. I had to take an initiative because no one else is going to do it for me. I'm not employed. I'm a full-time business owner. So therefore, if you're a full-time business owner as well, take the initiative. And sometimes that initiative means finishing the job. That's actually a very strong leadership thing. It's not just starting the job, not just working on the job, but actually seeing it through to its conclusion and its closeout. I've always been bad at that. I've taken some very strong pills of responsibility for that in the past, and discovered that I really need to concentrate much more hard on finishing the job. So some examples of going above and beyond could be that you know that the client really only stipulated they want these 3 points done, but you know that something could be much better for them by doing that fourth point. So if you're designing a piece of graphics for them, they say, I want this color, this shape, this logo, and this message. And then you say, you go and give them back something and say, look, I just noticed that the message actually used a word that it could actually be looked at really negatively if looked at by certain people. So I replace it with this word. What do you think? Going above and beyond shows initiative. It shows that you know what you're doing. Initiative shows your expertise, because only people who are experts and confident in what they're doing will go out on a limb and make those changes. Helping others could be an example of that. Somebody in your industry doesn't know how to do a particular task more efficiently. So they put out a call for help and they say, look, does anyone know how to do this better? Now, they might be your competitor. You go out there and say, look, here, use this piece of software. It'll actually do that thing a lot better for you. By helping others, you're showing initiative, not only to that person, but to the people who are watching that happen. You become the person in that industry who is not only seen as someone who helps others, but you're somebody who is a leader and an expert, and you can advise others in your industry of how to do things better, more efficiently, or more effectively. By taking risks, an example would be, for instance, where you say, well, the client said they wanted black curtains for this event. The problem is black curtains actually cause problems with the photography. So I'm going to get just like a gunmetal gray, because it doesn't mess with the photography so much. And by doing that, they don't walk in and get angry because of the lack of black curtains. They come in and say, oh, why are they not black? And say, okay, this is actually why. And we had to make a real quick decision. And I knew your photos are really important. And they'll go, man, thank you so much for thinking about that. It could have caused disaster with our photos. You took a risk. You didn't have time to check on it. And sometimes those risks, being very calculated risks, will help you to get a better job done. And when it comes to finishing a job, it could just be that you can see that your team is struggling to get the job done. So you take a little bit of extra time out and help them to finish the job. Or you can see that just 1 extra hour after work today will get that job done, so you can get it out and not have to have it stressing you out tomorrow. That is an example of initiative as well. Self-empowerment, as we come to the closing 8 minutes, I've got to rush this along, is all about you taking responsibility for your attitudes, for your behaviors, and for your actions. To be more effective and to take better responsibility of things, follow these steps and screenshot them if you absolutely must. First of all, state what you want to achieve in life. You will become more effective by taking control. Start with stating what you actually want to achieve, because without a goal, you have no direction to head towards. Secondly, understand that there's a gap between where you are now and where you want to be. Once you know what that is, what the goal is, once you know what the gap is between here and there, create an action plan by listing all the steps it will take you to get there. What are the individual things you need to do to go from where you are to where you want to be? And fourth, measure those results. Without measurements, you don't know whether you're succeeding. So measure the outcome against your goal. If your goal is to grow your revenue from $100,000 a year to $250,000 a year, and you've set about what the gap is, that's between 100 and 250,000, you've listed all the steps of it. When you get to the end of that year, measure how you went. Did you get to $250,000? And if you didn't, then look at whether you followed all those steps you said you would. If you didn't do that, then you have to go back and go into a process we call continuous improvement. And that continuous improvement is about integrating in the changes that worked for you and keep measuring and keep improving and keep setting new tasks and new actions to get to that place where you want to be. If it's to be a better boss, your own best boss, then you could say, for instance, go back and go to step one and say, I want to be someone who takes more responsibility for my business. Great. So where are you at now? Oh, I tend to blame a lot of other people. Great. Okay. You want to be a better boss. You tend to blame people a lot for things going wrong. Well, what are the steps you're going to take more personal responsibility for that? You've already taken the first step, which is by accepting that you do this kind of behavior. Then you get to the end of a period of time, let's just say 6 months that you set yourself, and you look at what your thinking's like. Am I interacting with my thinking better? Am I taking more control over my life? Am I a better boss? Am I actually my own best boss? And the continuous improvement comes not just from when you fail to reach that goal, but also when you reach that goal. Continuous improvement is what tells you, I need to set a new goal. I want to be even better. I want to take us to $1 million, from $250,000 to 1 million. What have I got to do to get there? And then it's just a matter of taking control of your performance. So that's a whole process of saying, well, I'm ultimately responsible for what I do. So self-empowerment allows you to model improved performance. So let's just say you're a team member in an events management company, or you're the boss of an events management company, right? So you know that your emails sometimes go out to your colleagues and your suppliers and all that sort of thing with mistakes. And you want to reduce the number of emails that happens to. First of all, you state that whole thing, that whole process we just went through. Step one, you acknowledge that you want to be more accurate in your emails. So step two, where do you want to get to and what's the gap? Okay, at the moment, about 15% of my emails going out with mistakes. I want to get that to 0. Great. We know where you want to get to. You're taking control of your performance when you then list the steps you'll take. Step one, I will proofread every email I go through. Step two, I'll use Grammarly as a plug into my email to make sure I don't make those mistakes. Great. Set yourself that task. In a month, go back and measure it and see if you've done that. And then keep doing it again for all those little things you want to get better at. This is called training and coaching. And this is something you can do yourself. You don't need an outside coach to help you to write better emails. Know your strengths and weaknesses as well. You'll hear many times during this that I've told you, oh, I've struggled with this. Oh, yes, I struggle with that. And I know my strengths and my weaknesses really, really well. And I've seen that this has translated into a lot more success in my life and in my business. When I knew that I was really, really bad at networking, I set about to become a better networker. And now I'm a great networker. When I first started my business, I knew that I had absolutely zero control over my finances and I was like a chaotic cyclone of rubbish going around. Then I get, well, okay, if I can't do that, I know that my gap is that I need to get better at this. And here's the steps I'm going to take to do that. So understanding those strengths and weaknesses, applying that personal development framework that we went through, steps 1 through to 5, and then go and then develop yourself. Know and understand that there's programs and resources out there that will help you to become better at what you do in everything in life. You don't have to sit where you are. You can actually have an unsatisfied satisfaction, if you like, that allows you to say, I like who I am. I love what I do. Really am my own best boss. But what if I could be even better? That hunger to get better and better is what helps us to become better bosses, better business owners, and better human beings overall. It helps us to be so much more in control of what it is we're doing. So what's next? are there next steps to take? You can talk more about this with some amazing people that I've worked with, from people like Tracy Sheen and Michelle Fragar in Queensland to Kajia McNaught and Sarah Thompson in Western Australia, to people like Liam Fay, who's in Rockhampton, or even going to someone like Ross Minnie, who is amazing at helping people get much more out of their financial stuff. We have a lineup of amazing professionals who can help you get there. I can help you get there too. Your first consult, if you haven't had one before with ASBAS, is absolutely free. If you've had one before, your second is $44, and any after that are $66. I thoroughly encourage you to go to asbas.com.au as a place where you can get that started. Or feel free to reach out to me via my email address, dante@treaty.com.au, and I can be found very, very easily, having a stupid name like I do, Dante St. James, on Facebook, LinkedIn, and Instagram as well. I'd love to hear from you. Are you ready to take control of yourself and your business and be your own best boss? I thoroughly encourage you to do that. My name's Dante St. James. I thank you so much for joining me. I'm just going to unshare my screen and put up my video. I'm back with this very loud shirt. Isn't it a great shirt? I really like the look of this shirt. Thank you for joining me, and I hope to see you in the next one.